Happy Friday, everyone. If you're watching the video when I post it, today's video is a follow-up from an in-class exercise related to homework for the social data analysis course, primarily using ArcPro on how to select data by attributes, with that export some layers, then how to create a final map from that. In class and for the assignment, we primarily use data from the Highfeld, the DHS Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data. I've used this in other videos. I think it's a huge data repository for data across the US. That's super helpful. Use it a lot over COVID because it was a one-stop shop that has, you can see here, a ton of different categories of data. Purposes of today, we're going to use two different types. We're going to use boundary level data for the US states, and then I'll find a random one that's point level. For the assignment, we looked at colleges and universities across the US, so the education side. A lot in here, I'll probably go law enforcement just to make it a bit more relatable. But with that, started out downloading a boundary level file. So this is going to be a shape file that has the boundaries for all US states. With that, it comes with the territories as well. So I'm going to download the same one we used in class. So if I were to click on the US state, it's going to generate and open up in a map for us. You can apply filters within this data set here. I'm not going to get into that, but it does save some time. I'm just going to show how to do it in ArcPro. You can see here we have 56, and obviously if we have 50 states, we have 6 extra ones that we're going to have to deal with. And you can already see that Puerto Rico's in here, DC and some of the other territory islands are part of it that we'll get through. With that though, we're just going to download, again, get in the habit of, for our purposes, we're just going to download the shapefile. File management as we continue on in this course. It's going to be incredibly important, understanding where you're saving, get in the habit of new folders, naming them, understanding where you're saving anything with it. So this is week 6, and that's for the assignment. So I'm going to make a new one, even though I already have it open. I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to create a new folder then, and do week 6 assignment. New folder, direct it here to save, and I'm going to come back to the main page, and I want to find another data set for this. When I say that, it has a catalog you can go through, but we also know if I just scroll all the way down, if you're not familiar with this, a ton of different data sets that span across the United States that are super, super helpful to use. Since this is a CRIM-based course, let's go into law enforcement. With that, we know we have local law enforcement locations, court jurisdictions, and prison boundaries. There's some other ones you can work with. I guess it already screwed it down for us. Within here, to where if you're interested, a nice one-stop shop to grab some of this. Let's go ahead and just use local law enforcement locations. We're going to open this up. It'll open in a map again, and as you can see, we have just over 23,000 records, so 23,000 points related to law enforcement agencies across the United States. Going to download it again as a shapefile. Going to save it to the same folder. It's still zipped, so I'm going to have to unzip that before I can use it. So to do that, I have it on my other screen. I'll pull it over. I need to unzip both of these. So remember, if you're on campus and you're using a computer, when you right click on the file, it's going to be 7-zip. If it's in the folder that you want, you can do extract files here, and it will create a folder that's unzipped for you. If you're on a normal one, it will generate just an extract all, and I'm going to save and extract, and do the same part for the US boundaries. Bring it over just to show. And from here, we have our 2 primary files that we want to use to select by attributes and show a couple different ways we can go about doing this. So with that, I'm going to open ArcGIS Pro, and I'm going to create a new project folder for this, given that it is a specific class assignment. Or if you want to come back to it in the future, you don't finish it in one setting or sitting, it's all there for us. I'm going to start with a new map. This is going to be assignment 6. I'm going to change where this is saved based on the folder itself. So courses, spatial, week 6 assignment, click OK. So we're good there. It's going to generate with a base map for us. Now, oftentimes when people get confused on where to add data, it comes to insert, and a lot of people in class have been selecting add folder. At this point, we're not at that stage of adding folders or connections, given this is our 2nd week in ArcPro, so getting used to just how to import data directly, how to load it, and how to get to a final map, and just really selecting some of the data, similar to what we did in Excel, some of the basic skill sets that you'll use frequently. If you come over to the map tab at the top, And then here you have add data. So from here, you just have to direct ArcGIS to where you want it to find the data. Now, if you're in a folder that you know you just saved data to and it's not showing, for PC, hit F5. It's essentially a refresh. So it'll tell ArcPro, hey, I was working on something outside of ArcPro at the same time it was open, so I want you to refresh and see what changes I've made. And then typically, hitting F5, it will generate the files that you have, say, unzipped or moved around outside of ArcPro. Here, I need to add both of them. So we have our US boundaries. Now I'm going to add the local law enforcement points. And I'm just going to zoom in on the contiguous US. And at this point, we have two different files. We have a boundary file itself, the polygon of the states. We also have the law enforcement locations here. I'm going to open the attribute table for the US boundaries. So right-click on it, open the attribute table, and you can see here that the different fields and variables we have associated with it. The GeoID is the FIPS code to it. So if I were to double-click on GeoID, you can see that it has a unique identifier. We've touched on it in different videos. Every state has a unique 2-digit number, Arkansas being 05 is that one. This also allows us to identify names in the GeoID if we need to select some out. So say I was interested in only focusing on the contiguous United States. So that would be essentially 48 specific polygons that I would be interested in. When I say there's other ones, since I did it based on GeoID, if I go to the bottom, you can see that we have the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico up to American Samoa. We also have DC and Puerto Rico in here. So there's about 8 that I need to remove. So I only have the 48 contiguous states, so I can zoom in on those itself. With that, we've covered select by attributes, and you could do 8 different select by attributes, and you could select it based on the name itself and go through that way. So if I wanted to do name, and I could show you is equal to, and then I did America Samoa. It's selecting out that specific one, but I could add multiple clauses to this of an or statement. I could do name again is equal to Alaska. Keep in mind, I would have to select out Alaska and Hawaii. And we're good that way to where now it would extend it to I have 2 selections. I keep doing and adding clauses to select those. The issue that could be, and I'm just going to clear it, is that depending on how many you need to select, and since this is a smaller file, you can do similar to an Excel, just using control, go through and just select the ones you know you need to get rid of. So if I select on 2, I know I need to get rid of Alaska. Holding down control, I select 9 for District of Columbia. And then I let go of control when I'm using the scroll on the mouse, or you end up zooming in and out like this. But now I hold it again to select Hawaii. And those are the 3 that are within it. So I need to now kind of go downwards to select the other 5 at the end. Now you might wonder, well, these are the ones you want to get rid of. You want to keep the other ones. So you can see down here I have 8 out of 56 selected. If I hit the switch here, it's going to switch what I have selected. You can see now I have 48 selected. And on the map, and I'll uncheck the law enforcement, you can see these are now all highlighted. Those ones I've selected. So I've just changed my selected. I selected the ones that I didn't want, hit switch to identify the ones I want to keep. So since these are the ones I want to keep, I want to save these as a separate layer itself. So I want to right click on the layer that I want to export from. So that's the US state boundaries. I'm going to come down to data and just export features. Here you can see it's reminding you that you only have 48 selected, so that's what it's going to export for you. And you just need to specify where you want to save it to, be it your geodatabase or within a specific course folder. So I'm going to come back into my spatial week 6 assignment, hit open, and I'm going to say US states 48 config. And keep in mind, in class, some of you wanted to use that 48 at the front. ArcPro doesn't like when you start with a number. You can see I still use underscores because it oftentimes doesn't like spaces as well. So just get in the habit of how you save files is very different than what you would do in a lot of other Microsoft-based programs. Click Save, hit OK. And now you have a file that's generated in your table of contents, and you can see it's the exact same color, which is annoying. But keep in mind, anytime you have something selected, just get in the habit once you've done something to clear that out. I'm going to uncheck this state boundary one. And now as I zoom out, you can see that we do not have Alaska, we do not have Hawaii. And if I were to open this attribute table, we have the 48 contiguous US states with DC kicked out as well. So if I were to right click on the state and hit zoom to layer, it's zooming to the specific boundary file itself. So within here, we now have, and if you want to change the symbology, just double click on the symbology. Oftentimes I use outlines for states itself, but you have the options within here. You can also go into the properties and change the color and everything with that as well. For our purposes, this is a pretty good one for what we're trying to show. With that now, we have over just 23,000 law enforcement agencies selected. With that, if I open this attribute table, and we'll get into select by locations in the near future, but for now, we want to do some selection. So say I'm interested in how many law enforcement agencies, local law enforcement agencies there are in a specific state. As I scroll across, we know we have state here, we have city and a zip code. And we even have the type of different law enforcement, so we have local, special. As I scroll down, there'll probably be some other ones that pop up here, sheriff's office, so what we often think about the county. So we have different ones within that as well. So we have different variables that we could select out on, and obviously some other code information associated with it, a number of officers and that type of thing. For now, if I wanted to select, say, just law enforcement agencies in the state of Texas, I would still do you can select by attribute at the top or within the table itself. And in this situation, I want the state to be equal to Texas. You have different options in here, and this is where, as it progresses, we'll use some of these different ones. If you're more comfortable with writing SQL, you have this option too. And the nice part is, as you put it in, so at state is equal to, and now I want it to be Texas. So I'm going to scroll down to Texas. If I go back into the SQL line, it shows you what the SQL would look like. So it's a nice way to learn some code along the way of what you're trying to do. Recommend just going back and forth to see if you wanted to write or extend it, what it would look like on that part, so you can add clauses to it and all that. I can hit apply though, and we see that there's 1,724 local law enforcement agencies in the state of Texas. And as I move this table and I click OK here, you can see only the points within Texas are highlighted here. You can also, within the attribute table in the bottom left of that, show only the selected records. So you can see here, these are the highlighted ones. Now you could say the assignment asks for you to do this. You could export these points out as there's on a layer as well. So if I were to right click on local law enforcement, data, export features, going to change this again to Texas law enforcement. You can see again, it specifies that it only had just over 1,700 agencies selected. So that's what it's going to export for me. Click OK. And now I have a separate layer. If I turn off that all of them, I have a smaller layer now of just Texas agencies here. So a subset of that. Now from here, say I wanted to focus only on creating a map that just had Texas and the local law enforcement agencies here. With that, I've already selected out my Texas law enforcement agencies, but now I need to come back to my state and hit clear to get rid of this selection. With that, I have two state boundaries, but with that, I need just to focus on one. Because if I were to make this a final map, I still have boundary files and everything else for the states around it. So you can open up either a state boundary file, but now I just want to select out one. So I can open the attribute table. I'm just going to put it in order to make it a bit easier. I can scroll down to Texas, and if I just click on 41, you can see here it's highlighted. You can do the select by attribute. They work both ways. And again, I want to export this out. Keep in mind, you want to export out a feature when you want it to be a layer. If you were to export out just the table, it's truly the attribute table information in front of you and not the feature itself, the shapefile, the polygon boundary that you want to work with. So I'm going to export this out. Make sure it's saved into the correct place. I do this out of habit. I'm just going to say Texas state. I'm good with that. Click OK. I'm now going to clear my selection, close this attribute table by closing it out. Turn off all of my states here to where now you can see that the only state that's left is the large state of Texas. Now with this, if you wanted to make a final map that's just displaying this, And in the assignment, I asked you to do a subset of even the college and universities. For the purposes today, we're just going to leave these in here as a whole. We could say focus on county sheriffs, special investigation, special units, or truly just local law enforcement itself. With that though, for trying to make a final map, you need to add all the add-ons, be it north arrow, scale bar, title, legend, everything with that. So I want to come over to our insert tab at the top, new layout. Let's just try, I'm thinking of the shape of Texas. You could probably get away with either portrait or landscape, just given the size. For now, let's do a letter style just to make it different from what we've typically done in class. I'm going to use the map frame. And historically, we've done it this way to where we're just pointing it over the entire part, and I'm just going to zoom in on Texas. Zoom to layer, and it takes up space. And I'm going to show this because I know this is going to come up on homework assignments for the state of Arkansas. If the boundary ends up being pretty close to the borders of the page itself, and you're trying to put a title on the map, you don't want the title to go over what you're trying to display. So what you can do is bring down the mapping frame itself. Oops, Control Z, I moved it. And if you need to resize based on your mapping frame, just right click on that shapefile. Again, for the assignment, it would be Arkansas. For this one, it's Texas. And it will resize based on the area it's allowed. So now you have a top space, a space at the top that allows you to put a title up here that separates it out, and it's a nice break point for that. So I wanted to add a title here. I'm clicking on the text box, and I'm just going to make it the width of the space we have up here. It's going to be local law enforcement agencies in the state of Texas. Now you might see that and think, well, that's super tiny, small, everything with that, to where if I right click now and go into the properties, it's going to pull up over here, and I have the text symbol options where I can come in and change the appearance. So I can make that a larger font. Just make sure you hit apply each time so you can kind of get a feeling to how spaced out and how big it gets. So I'm going to go up to 22, hit apply, and then for the position, I want to center it. So we're good there as well. I still need to hit apply. You can start to see as I change this, then it fills out that space a bit more, and it is truly a title, separation from the map there. We also need to add in north arrow, scale bar, a legend, and another text box. For the text box, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the bottom left-hand corner. And here we want the author of it, so that would be me, G. Drawby. The affiliation, that's for me, UA, so University of Arkansas. Then our data source. And for ours, we use the Highfield, and this is where, as long as you're giving credit, give credit where it's due. You can put the website in there as well. I'm just going to pull this and stretch it out so it has a bit more space. And then I want it to truly be in that bottom corner, so I'm going to move and just reposition it to be down a bit more. And I'm actually going to make the font a little smaller just so it's tucked away and not grabbing too much attention. But it still gives credit to you for making the map, letting people know your affiliation. You can put your email address in there. You can put a link to a website, depending on how you export this out. A lot of options there. So we have a couple of the items done. We have our author, affiliation, and data source. We have our title. Let's add a legend. And I just click the part up here. If you click down, you have different options within it. Going with the first one. This is a nice space over here. It gives us room. And again, as a reminder, I'm going to make a small box. If you ever put in a legend and see these 3 dots in brackets, it means it just doesn't have enough space to display what you're trying to show. So I'm just going to make a larger box. And now you can see plenty of space, but you might look at that and think, well, I need to correct the titles of it, what it's depicting, everything with that. So keep in mind, we want to spell out Texas, put in some spaces. So in our table of contents, I'm just going to double click. I'm going to put, for the points, just law enforcement agencies. We know it's in the Texas state itself based on the title itself, so I'm going to click OK. And I actually don't want the state boundary of Texas in it, so in that drawing order a table of contents, I'm going to click this arrow, make it go down. I'm going to uncheck our Texas state one. It's not showing the other ones, but if you ever wanted to take them off, you have that option to where now we're just left with the legend. of law enforcement agencies in Texas. If I move this out a bit more, it's actually not giving me room to put that in. Huh. I thought it was spaced out a bit more. But now we have a legend of what those points mean on the map. Now, say you wanted to separate this out depending on the background, the base map that you're showing. You can change the background of the legend box itself. Right now, it's still on legend. You just want to click that, click background. It's set to null or no color. If you wanted a light gray to set it apart, and then add an outline color. Right now it's black, but there's no width, so I'm just going to do a light one to that. Hit apply, and you can see now that the legend sits out a bit more. It's identifiable. It doesn't take up too much space, but gives the reader an opportunity to see what that looks like. I still need to add a north arrow. Not shocking, I use the same ones time and time again. Again, you don't want these to be huge and taking up a lot of space. They should be tertiary to everything else. So you have primary is the focus of the map, secondary is some of the titles and everything with that. And then tertiary are these items where they're useful to the reader as a whole. So you need them, but they shouldn't be the main focal point to it. So I'm fine with where these are. You can work on the positioning if you want it to be within the middle of it. But since it's over the ocean and kind of the blue itself, it sets itself apart. I don't need to worry about a background color to that. So right now I have the main parts, and as the semester progresses, we'll get into details of changing out. So say I wanted to change these points to a different color. At the last minute, it's like, oh shit, I need to make a change. If I still clicked on law enforcement agencies, it brings up that symbology here. So I'm going to type police to see what comes up. Go police car, police station. I'm going to go with a smaller one just to see what that looks like. And you can see and look at this and I'm like, well, that blue's not looking too great. I'm still going to use, I'm trying to think, this one. If I come up to the properties now of this one, you can change the color of it to where if I want this to be, let's go with an orange, because what is that, Longhorns? What that looks like, and that's where you can mess with it cosmetically and make changes to what's easier on the eye. It might be better with black, and this is where it takes some time just to see what people think. Obviously, we know there's a huge influx in kind of a higher density of local law enforcement agencies up here. We expect that, and then in the more rural areas, you're not going to have as many outside of the metropolitan hubs. So that's expected. With that, you can see the legend updates when you make any changes. So if I change this back to orange, all of this is updating together. In the future, when we convert to graphics, it'll change some of that, but those are the last minute items. With that, you can also add a border to your page itself. If you want it to be a bit different too, that's on you. And that's where I say, as you export out and look at the final image, you might not be happy with it. You might want to make a border in, say, PowerPoint, Canva, whatever else you want to set it apart. But your first map that you probably go to save, you'll look at it the next day. It's like, oh, I could change this. This is more digestible. Have someone else look at it. That's always a big part, is your eyes view it one way. You want to see the average person, the lay person. If you were trying to voice what you were depicting, can they get that from what you're showing up here? So at this point, you could either do the snip, go around, and then you have to crop a little bit. You can also go into share, and you can export the layout as a JPEG, and I'm going to save this to my week and my spatial folder, week 6 assignment. Texas agency, example. Going to click save. I'm okay with everything now, how it is. Click export, and this is where when we start running analysis, it's going to have a similar bar at the bottom. You want to see a green check mark like this at the end, to where now if I open up my folder, so I go into spatial, week 6 assignments, Texas law enforcement agency. This is where I say this is your first time looking at it. Are there things that you would change? I would probably add a border to the entire map in the sheet itself to make it just almost outlined for it. I might play back and forth of having the state and the drawing order to be on top of the agency, little things like that, maybe change the size of the points itself. But this is where I say go back and forth between what you're looking at, how it's saved, how it's exported, and what you're trying to depict with the map. With that, that's a nice walkthrough of what we covered in class. Similar steps you'll have to do for the assignment, different data sets for the law enforcement agencies versus college, university, but gives you enough to get by on the assignment with that. If there's questions, feel free to reach out. Until next time,